I like to begin any course I teach in ethics with a discussion of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. I like to use this particular text, one, because it's accessible and easy to understand. Two, it's an early text that serves as the foundation for many of the words we use in ethics, for many of the arguments that we use in ethics. Three, it has a self-help quality to it. The story goes that Aristotle wrote it for his nephew, Nicomachus, to use to acquire the kinds of character traits that a good Greek would have. So what we're seeing here is a practical explication of the principles which everyone should live by. The first word in the Ross translation of Book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics is virtue. This is an unfortunate word choice and has been the choice for 400 or 500 years. It is a bad choice only because its root is Latin, and that Latin root means manly. So I'd like to stay away from that idea of virtue. Instead, let's use a more direct translation of the Greek word. The Greek word is arete, and it is translated excellence everywhere else. So what we're talking here is about excellence. Aristotle talks about intellectual excellence elsewhere. Here, he's talking about moral excellence. He says of moral excellence that it comes as a result of habit. One of the interesting things about all moral teachers, and at least for the first, up until the 20th century, all ethical teachers want us not to so much reason about our ethical actions, but rather acquire the habit of applying those moral principles unthinkingly. Just as a tennis player practices and practices and practices so that when they get on the court, they don't have to think about what they do, they just do it. Just as a musician doesn't spend all their time thinking during their performance about, I'll put the finger here, I got to think there, I got to get a breath. No, you've rehearsed and you've practiced and you've built this all in. So that on the time of the performance, it's all essentially unthinking. And this is the goal Aristotle wants us to achieve, to become moral without thought. So we have to acquire habits. Indeed, the Greek word ethos, habit, is the root for ethike, the Greek word for morality. So habit, moral habit, or maybe we should say excellent habits. Okay, now what's an excellent habit? Well, there's two things we want to look at as we look at an excellent habit. One is that the excellent habit should make us the best member of our community, our family, our country as we can be. The goal is to be praiseworthy. The goal is to be successful. The goal is to be ideal, your best possible self. So that's one way in which your habit is excellent. There is another notion, though, of how your habit is excellent. Since all of the intellectual material is discussed elsewhere, and now all we're talking about is good habits, the kinds of habits Aristotle wants us to acquire are the kinds of habits that enable us to best control that unthinking part of ourselves, our appetites. What he's looking for is that we develop an unconscious control of our unconscious behaviors. Seems like the best thing to do. Anybody who's ever tried to break a bad habit knows that if you just sit and think, I can't do this, I can't do this, it doesn't work. You wind up doing it anyway. You have to find some other way of controlling the habit, one that essentially doesn't require your constant attention, your conscious mind, but rather by developing a new habit, by making the old habit impossible to follow. These ways we can control our old habits. So he wants us to control our appetites with these new, better habits through practicing the right actions. And if we practice the right action long enough, it will become our habit, and then we don't have to think about it anymore. And this then is moral education. Just practicing doing the right thing. Now, the fact is, our levels of excellence and the kinds of thing we're going to describe about ourselves as excellent are going to differ from person to person. Some of us have little trouble with some appetites. Others have a great deal of trouble with the same appetites. So what's going to count for excellence in one is not going to count as excellence in the other. Other appetites, other situations require other qualifications you or I may not have, or we may have, and as such, these will help describe what is excellent for us. We're going to find one particular, very unique form of excellence that most of us need give no thought to, but I'd like to spend a little time looking at it because it points to Aristotle in a completely different light, one that we don't often think of him as, but we should. Okay, but back to this idea of individualized excellence. I want to press home, because most Aristotle scholars this would never even occur to, but some people will say of this ethics that it's a relativistic ethics, and no, it's not. No, it's not. It is true that we may all have differing levels we go to in terms of how we become excellent, but the goal is the same for everyone. Be excellent. Be right there where you need to be. Now, where do you need to be? Well, Aristotle says we don't need to be on the extremes. These extreme positions are either, well, they're vices. That's all they can be called, vices, one way or the other. So pick an appetite. He says, okay, say eating. You will have the glutton, who eats too much, and you have the ascetic, who eats too little. The goal should be eat just what's right for you, for your body type, for your time in life, for the activities you're indulging in on a day-to-day basis. He would say, look, you're sitting there, you fat old man, and you're not doing anything. You don't need to be eating very much. Now, when you were young and vigorous and out there and going and bicycling and fencing and engaging in all kinds of activity, well, then you needed to eat more and should have. And I'll be fair with you, I did. And the reason I have this is because I didn't listen to Aristotle and cut back. As my activities shrank, I should have shrunk my eating. I did not maintain the balance that he asks for. On the other hand, neither should you be fasting yourself to death. We should be eating the right amount for us. And again, it differs on our time in life, what we're doing. Let's take another example. There is perhaps not an appetite, but a desire at least, to help people out. Imagine that we're at the beach and there's someone out there drowning. Well, I'm not a very strong swimmer. So for me to dive into the ocean and try to save that person would be foolhardy, Aristotle would call it. And I would just wind up getting both of us killed. But to stand and do nothing, to be just petrified with fear, or to run away and ignore the whole problem, this Aristotle would call cowardice. I can do better than that. So I should take a look at the situation and go, well, I can't go diving in after them, but I can't stand here frozen. Maybe I could call for help. Maybe I could throw a line. Maybe I could find a float and throw that out there, but do something to help the situation. Now, as I say, I'm not a strong swimmer at all. But let's imagine while I'm standing there on the beach watching this person in distress, along comes a person who is a good swimmer. Now that person, providing they're properly trained and are ready to deal with it, if they don't jump into the water and try to save them, they're being a coward. See, it's based on their abilities and their facilities. So they should jump in and save that person's life. Just standing on the beach, even just standing on the beach and calling somebody would be inadequate. Now, to go beyond that, perhaps if there were more than one person out there for them to try to save all of them, or perhaps if we were in extraordinarily rough conditions that even though strong swimmers shouldn't go out in. So there would be conditions where not saving a life or trying to save a life would be okay. It's always going to be contextual to the person we're talking about, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your appetites lead you for and against, what passions grab you and what passions don't. These are the things that you have to realize. You're looking for that middle road. It's often called the golden mean. And it is. It's just knowing if I go here, I'm going too far. If I don't go at least to there, I'm not going far enough. That's where you want to be, right? Smack down the middle. He offers examples in the next chapter, actually, next couple of chapters, in fact, examples of some of these things. And he's always talking about the various powers and passions we have, the urges we feel, and how we have to remain in the middle of the road with them. We can't let them go too far one way or the other. Whether we're talking about eating or other physical pleasures, whether we're talking about social pleasures and social endeavors like generosity or open-heartedness. There are people who, if you open your heart and open your door, they will walk right off with everything you own. You've been too open. You haven't been wise. You've been too generous, too magnanimous, too willing to give to people who don't really deserve it. Or maybe they deserved something and you just gave too much or not enough. This is always the catch. You're looking to hit the ball down the middle, that central sweet spot that means that your habit is excellent. It's letting you be the best you can be. And that's all Aristotle wants for us, is that self-realization, that self-perfection, that means of reaching a balance in the world. He calls this balance eudaimonia. Now, literally, good-spiritedness. All right? But when we're talking about a spirit here, we're not necessarily talking about good spirit here. We're not necessarily talking about, oh, I'm in a good mood. Oh, what a happy boy I am. Happiness is how eudaimonia was translated for years. But it's not quite right. What we're looking for here is that sense of your spirit, your demon, your self, your innermost self is being fulfilled. Good. EU, always good. Euthanasia, good death. Euphonious, good sounding. Eudaimonia, good spiritedness. So we're creating a good spirit in you through these habits. And by following this road down the middle, your spirit is good. Not just in the sense, as I said, being happy, but right. In accord with your truest, bestest self. Rather different than our other theories of morals that we'll see. Keep talking philosophy.